never imagined that one simple request could tilt my entire world off its axis. It started on a Thursday evening, the kind of quiet night where everything feels almost too normal. The apartment smelled faintly of lavender candles, and the hum of my girlfriend's music filled the air, soft indie chords looping endlessly from her phone. I was sitting on the couch, half distracted, scrolling through my messages when she called my name. There was something about the tone in her voice, that subtle mix of curiosity and calculation, that made me look up immediately. "Hey," she said, walking in from the bedroom. "Can I ask you something a little weird?" Those words, "a little weird," should have warned me. But I just smiled and told her she could ask me anything. That was our thing, after all. Total honesty, no secrets. She hesitated for a second, holding the edge of the doorway, and I noticed her nails, freshly painted in a soft rose pink. "You remember that costume party Sarah's throwing on Saturday?" she began. I nodded. "Well, we're supposed to go as opposites. And I had this idea, just an idea, that maybe we could switch roles for fun. Like you go as me and I go as you." I laughed at first, thinking she was joking. I pictured her in one of my hoodies, baggy jeans, and messy hair, and I chuckled. But when I saw her face, I realized she wasn't kidding. She looked deadly serious, but not in a cruel way, more like she was testing something fragile, trying to see if it would break. "You mean like me wearing your clothes?" I asked slowly. She nodded, eyes sparkling just a bit too much. "Just for the party. It would be hilarious. Come on, you'd make a pretty cute version of me." I wanted to say no. My first instinct was to laugh it off, maybe change the subject. But there was something disarming in her tone, teasing but also sincere, like she genuinely believed it would be fun. And there was another layer beneath it that I couldn't quite read, a mixture of curiosity and challenge. "I don't know," I said, scratching my neck. "I've never done anything like that." "Exactly," she replied. "That's why it'll be fun. New experiences, remember? You always say life's too short not to try weird things." I sighed, pretending to think it over, but I already knew I was losing the argument. She had that smile, the one that could make me say yes to almost anything. By the time we finished dinner, she was already planning the outfit. I watched in a half-daze as she rummaged through her closet, humming to herself. She pulled out a soft cream sweater, a pleated skirt, and a pair of black tights. "This will totally fit you," she said confidently, even though I had my doubts. I kept telling myself it was just for fun, just a costume. But when she started laying everything out on the bed with such care, something about the moment shifted. It wasn't funny anymore, it was real, intimate in a way I didn't expect. Later that night, I stood in front of the mirror while she circled around me like a stylist on a mission. She applied a bit of foundation, brushed my hair, and made small talk to ease the awkwardness. But I could feel her studying me, analyzing every reaction. "You're doing great," she said softly when she saw my nervous expression. "Just relax." Her hands were steady as she guided me through it, a dab of lip tint here, a little eyeliner there, and slowly, the reflection staring back at me stopped looking entirely like me. It was unsettling, almost surreal. I could still see my features, but softened, reshaped, rewritten. My jaw looked less harsh, my eyes seemed larger, and my lips, well, they looked like hers. "Wow," she whispered, stepping back. "You actually pull this off." I swallowed hard, unsure how to respond. My mind was a blur of conflicting thoughts, embarrassment, curiosity, disbelief. But also, if I was being honest, a strange spark of something else. It wasn't exactly pride, and it wasn't exactly shame. It was like discovering a version of myself that had always existed quietly in the background, waiting to be seen. "See," she said with a grin. "You look amazing. You just have to own it." I laughed nervously, trying to play along. "You're enjoying this way too much." "Maybe," she said, smirking. "But admit it, this is kind of cool." I wanted to disagree, but when I caught another glimpse of the mirror, I hesitated. There was something almost magnetic about that reflection. I didn't look like a joke or a caricature. I looked like someone I could almost recognize. Someone softer, more open, more expressive. She must have noticed the way my eyes lingered, because her voice softened again. "It's okay," she said. You don't have to laugh it off. Just see yourself for a second. Really see. And I did. For the first time, I let my guard down and looked without judgment. My heart was pounding, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was something else entirely, a strange, quiet awe. When she finally stepped away to clean up, I stayed by the mirror, lost in thought. I didn't know what to call what I was feeling. Confusion? Curiosity? Maybe both. But one thing was certain. Something inside me had shifted, just slightly, but undeniably. That night, long after she fell asleep, I found myself getting up and walking back to the mirror. The makeup was still faintly there, smudged around the edges, but I could still see the trace of that other person. I touched my reflection lightly, almost afraid to break the moment. What had started as a silly costume was becoming something much more complicated. And deep down, I think I knew this wasn't the last time I'd see that version of myself. The next morning, I woke up with that strange mixture of clarity and confusion that only comes after a night you can't quite process. The light from the blinds cut across the room in thin gold lines, and beside me, she was still asleep, peaceful, unaware of the chaos in my head. I turned over, staring at the ceiling, trying to convince myself it was just a fun experiment, nothing more. But deep down, I couldn't shake the memory of the mirror. As I got ready for work, I caught my reflection again in the bathroom. My hair was still slightly parted the way she'd styled it, and for a second, I saw a flicker of that same softness. It vanished quickly, but it left something behind. An ache, maybe, or a question I didn't yet know how to ask. That whole day, I was distracted. Every time someone spoke to me, it took a second too long to respond. My girlfriend texted me around lunch, a simple message. Still can't get over how good you looked last night, face with tears of joy. I stared at the screen longer than I should have, then typed back something light, something safe. Ha, yeah, you're not turning me into your twin anytime soon. But the truth was, part of me wasn't so sure anymore. When Saturday came, the party loomed like a storm on the horizon. I tried to act casual, but she could sense my hesitation. You can still back out, she said as we got ready that evening, but I think you'll regret it if you do. You've already come this far. I looked at the clothes laid out again. The same cream sweater, the same skirt, the same quiet challenge staring back at me. I wanted to say no, to laugh and grab my jeans instead, but when I looked at her, her eyes bright with that mischievous spark, I couldn't. Maybe I didn't want to disappoint her. Maybe, if I was honest, I didn't want to disappoint myself. So I agreed. She helped me again, this time with practiced confidence. Each step felt easier than before, not because it was natural, but because it wasn't as terrifying anymore. I let her style my hair again, this time curling it slightly. The sensation was strange but not unpleasant. It made me feel delicate, like I had to move differently, think differently. She guided my posture, corrected the way I walked, laughed when I got it wrong. Relax, she said. You're too stiff. It's not about pretending, just feel it. Move with it. So, I tried. And slowly, something shifted again. My reflection began to feel less foreign. When she finally declared me ready, I didn't argue. We took a few pictures before leaving, her in my hoodie, me in her skirt, and she laughed when she saw them. But when she looked back at me, her laughter softened. You look really good, she said quietly. Better than I expected. I didn't know what to say. Compliments felt heavier than usual that night. At the party, people were amused at first. There were the usual jokes, the teasing, the surprised looks, but nobody was cruel. Everyone seemed genuinely impressed by her handiwork, and soon, I started to relax. It was just a costume, after all. Just a performance. But as the night went on, I found myself slipping into the role more easily than I expected. The way people talked to me, the way I responded, it was different. Softer. More careful. And yet, I felt oddly comfortable. There was a strange sense of calm in letting go of all the small, unspoken pressures I didn't realize I carried every day. At one point, while I was standing near the balcony, Sarah, the host, came over, laughing. I have to say, she told me, you're pulling this off better than anyone expected. You look like you've done this before. I laughed awkwardly, but inside, her words echoed. You look like you've done this before. When we got home that night, I was quiet. My girlfriend noticed immediately. Hey, she said softly, helping me take off the wig. You okay? Yeah, I said automatically, but my voice sounded uncertain even to me. She looked at me through the mirror, and for a long time, neither of us said anything. Finally, she spoke. You know, she began, you looked more comfortable tonight than I've seen you in a while. That's not true, I said, but it came out too quickly, too defensive. She smiled faintly, not mocking, just observant. It's okay if it is. I'm not judging. I just saw something different in you. Her words hung in the air long after we changed and crawled into bed. I wanted to forget about it, to go back to normal. But the more I tried, the more my thoughts returned to that moment, to her reflection, to mine, to that strange calm I'd felt beneath all the layers of fabric and makeup. Days turned into weeks, and life returned to its regular rhythm. But every so often, she'd mention it casually, like it was nothing. You know, you still owe me for helping with that outfit. Or, I swear, I can't unsee how good you looked that night. It became a running joke, at least for her. But for me, it was something else. Each mention reopened that quiet curiosity I tried to ignore. One evening, a few weeks later, I found her at her vanity, touching up her makeup before dinner. She was wearing that same sweater I'd worn to the party. Without really thinking, I said, You know, it's weird seeing that on you now. She looked up surprised. Weird how? I don't know, I said, shrugging. Guess I kinda got used to it. Her lips curved into a small, knowing smile. Got used to it, huh? I laughed, embarrassed. Forget I said anything. But she didn't. She turned in her chair and looked at me thoughtfully. You know, I've been thinking, she said slowly, you never got to really try it properly. That night was rushed, chaotic, full of people. What if we did it again? Just us. No party. No audience. My heart skipped a beat. Why? Because, she said simply, I think there's more to this than you're admitting. And I think you deserve to explore it without pressure. Her words hit me harder than I expected. I didn't know whether to feel exposed or grateful. But there was something about the way she said it, no mockery, no teasing, just quiet understanding. That night, I couldn't sleep. The thought replayed in my mind again, and again. What if we did it again? It wasn't about dressing up anymore. It was about facing something I didn't have the courage to name. And maybe, deep down, she knew that before I did. When I woke up the next morning, her words still lingered like an echo I couldn't silence. What if we did it again? It followed me through breakfast, through work, through every little silence between us. I couldn't tell if it scared me or excited me, but it felt like a door had opened, one I'd been circling for weeks without admitting it. That evening, she brought it up again, so casually it almost felt rehearsed. I meant what I said yesterday, she told me, stirring her tea. You don't have to decide now, but if you ever want to explore that side again, I'll help. No pressure, no jokes. I tried to laugh it off, but my voice came out quieter than I expected. You really think there's a side to explore? She shrugged, her eyes soft. I think everyone has parts of themselves they hide because they think they're not supposed to exist. Maybe this is just one of yours. Doesn't have to mean anything scary. Her words sank in deeper than I wanted to admit. That night, I stood in front of the mirror again, toothbrush in hand, and just stared. I looked the same as always, ordinary, familiar. But the memory of that other reflection still lived somewhere behind my eyes. It was strange how something that had started as a joke now felt like an unanswered question. A few days passed before I finally said yes. It was late. We were both home from work, and the air between us was easy, comfortable. She was on the couch reading, and without really planning to, I said, So, about what you said, maybe we could try it. Just once more. She looked up slowly, a smile spreading across her face, not triumphant, but relieved. Okay, she said softly. Whenever you're ready. It happened the following weekend. There was no rush this time, no party waiting, no friends expecting a laugh. It was just us. Quiet music playing, curtains half drawn, a strange sense of anticipation between us. She laid out a few things carefully, explaining each one like she was walking me through something sacred. "Try this blouse," she said, handing it to me. "It's simple, but the color will look good on you." I changed behind the folding screen, my hands slightly trembling. The fabric was lighter than I expected, soft against my skin, almost too gentle. When I stepped out, she smiled approvingly. "Better already," she said. "Now hair." We spent the next hour in that slow, meticulous rhythm, her guiding, me following. Each small adjustment made me feel like I was assembling something I didn't fully understand but couldn't resist building. The longer it went on, the quieter the room became, like both of us were holding our breath. When she finally told me to look, I hesitated. My pulse quickened. I turned toward the mirror, and there it was again, that strange, disarming reflection. But this time, it wasn't just a disguise. The expression in the mirror wasn't awkward or nervous. It was calm, thoughtful, present. She stood behind me, resting a hand lightly on my shoulder. "What do you see?" she asked. I searched for words, but couldn't find any. All I could do was stare at the reflection that felt like both me and not me at once. "I don't know," I said finally. "Someone who looks at peace, maybe." She nodded slowly. "That's what I see, too." We didn't talk much after that. She helped me remove the makeup, folded the clothes neatly, and we spent the rest of the night watching TV, pretending nothing had changed. But something had. The silence between us wasn't awkward. It was full, heavy with something unspoken but deeply understood. In the following days, I caught myself thinking about that reflection more often than I wanted to. Not because I wanted to dress that way again, but because I missed how it felt, that fleeting sense of calm, of alignment. It wasn't about the clothes or the appearance. It was about the way the mask I thought I was wearing started to feel more like honesty. One night, while we were cooking together, she said, "You've been quiet lately." "Just thinking," I said. "About the other night?" I nodded, not meeting her eyes. "Yeah." She put down the knife and turned to face me. "You don't have to hide it from me. Whatever you're feeling, it's okay. You don't need to make sense of it right away." I exhaled slowly. "It's just weird, you know? I didn't think I'd feel comfortable, or that it would stay with me this long." She smiled gently. "Comfort can surprise you. Sometimes it shows up where you least expect it." Her kindness made it harder, somehow. It meant this wasn't just a passing thing I could laugh away later. It was real, and she saw it before I even did. The next time it happened, I was the one who asked. It wasn't planned. We were cleaning the closet, sorting through clothes to donate, and she held up a dress she hadn't worn in years. "Should I keep this?" she asked. Without thinking, I said, "Maybe let me try it before you give it away." The moment the words left my mouth, we both froze. But instead of laughing, she just smiled faintly and handed it over. "Go ahead," she said softly. It fit almost perfectly. When I stepped in front of the mirror this time, there was no nervousness, no hesitation. I just looked, and something in me clicked quietly into place. She joined me, watching my reflection instead of me directly. "You see it now, don't you?" she whispered. I nodded slowly. "Yeah, I think I do." For the first time, it didn't feel like pretending. It didn't even feel like dressing up. It just felt like being. Like something inside had finally stopped fighting. But even as that peace settled over me, another feeling rose, fear. Because now that I'd seen it, I couldn't unsee it. I didn't know what it meant or where it was leading, but I knew things couldn't go back to exactly how they were. Not for me. Not for us. She must have sensed it too, because she reached for my hand, squeezed it gently, and said, "Whatever this is, we'll figure it out together. You don't have to be afraid of yourself." That night, as I lay awake, her words echoed in my head. "You don't have to be afraid of yourself." I wanted to believe that. I wanted to live it. But the truth was, part of me still was. Because if this version of me was real, then who had I been all along? The following days felt like I was walking through a fog that only I could see. On the outside, everything was the same job, the same routines, the same small talk. But inside, something fundamental had shifted. It was as though I had glimpsed a version of myself that had been locked away, and now every mirror, every stray reflection in a shop window, felt like an unfinished sentence waiting to be completed. She noticed, of course. She always did. One evening after dinner, as we sat on the couch, she turned the TV down and looked at me with that calm, searching expression I'd come to both appreciate and dread. "You've been somewhere else lately," she said. "Do you want to talk about it?" I tried to find the right words, but they tangled in my throat. "It's nothing dramatic," I said. "I've just been thinking a lot." "About what?" "About me, I guess." She nodded, as if she had expected that answer all along. "That's not a bad thing. You're allowed to learn who you are, you know." Her tone was kind, not probing, and somehow that made it harder to stay guarded. "It's weird," I admitted. "I never thought about how much of who I am is just habit. The way I walk, talk, even how I think I'm supposed to act. It all feels chosen for me." She leaned back, thinking. "Maybe it's not about choosing something new," she said softly. "Maybe it's about remembering the parts you never let yourself have." That sentence stayed with me for days. Remembering the parts you never let yourself have. It was so simple, yet it felt like she had cut straight to the center of something I didn't even have words for. Over the next week, I started experimenting again, quietly, in small ways. Not full transformations, just moments of exploration. A different way of styling my hair, a softer tone when I spoke, trying on one of her scarves before work and catching that flicker of calm in the mirror again. Each time I did, the world felt a little clearer, a little more aligned. But along with that clarity came fear. What if this changed how she saw me? What if I was slowly becoming someone she hadn't signed up for? I didn't know how to ask those questions without sounding like I was apologizing for something I couldn't control. One night, as we were getting ready for bed, I finally said, "Do you ever worry that this might be too much? That maybe I'm changing too much?" She looked up from brushing her hair, her reflection meeting mine in the mirror. "No," she said simply. "I worry that you'll stop halfway." That answer hit me harder than I expected. "Stop halfway?" She nodded. "You've spent so long trying to be what everyone expects. Now that you're finally letting yourself breathe, I'd hate to see you stop because you're afraid of what it means. You deserve to find peace, however that looks." There was no judgment in her voice, only quiet certainty. It was the kind of support that should have felt comforting, and it did, but it also scared me. Because she was right, I was afraid. Afraid of where this might lead, afraid that the person I was becoming would change everything I thought I knew about myself. A few days later, something happened that forced that fear into the open. We were invited to another gathering, smaller this time, just a few close friends. When she suggested we go, I hesitated. "Not like before," I said quickly. She smiled faintly. "Of course not. Unless you want to." That "unless" lingered between us. I wanted to say no, to keep this quiet, private, safe. But part of me wondered what it would feel like to show up as the version of myself that had been living quietly in mirrors and shadows. That night, I found myself standing in front of the wardrobe again, heart pounding. I reached for one of her blouses, the same one she'd lent me the second time, and just held it. The fabric still carried a faint trace of her perfume, something gentle and grounding. I didn't know why, but it gave me courage. When I finally stepped into the living room, she turned and froze. Then she smiled, not a teasing smile, not even surprise, just pride. "You look at home," she said. Her choice of words made my chest tighten. "At home?" She nodded. "Yeah. Like you've stopped pretending." I swallowed hard, unsure how to respond. We didn't go out that night. We stayed in instead, talking for hours about everything and nothing, about identity, fear, comfort, the strange way life sometimes gives you permission you didn't know you were waiting for. I told her how I'd started noticing things differently, how certain sounds, gestures, even colors felt new, more alive. She listened carefully, never interrupting, never pushing. Just listening. At one point, I said quietly, "I don't know what any of this means yet." She reached out, taking my hand. "You don't have to. You're allowed to be in the middle of it." That's where most people figure out who they are. Her calmness steadied me, but inside, I could still feel the storm. Part of me wanted to freeze this moment forever, the safety, the understanding. Another part wanted to know what came next, what it would mean if I kept following this thread. Over the next few weeks, life began to find a strange new rhythm. The fear didn't vanish, but it became quieter, less paralyzing. There were moments when I caught myself smiling without realizing it, small, unguarded smiles that felt unfamiliar but right. Sometimes she'd catch me staring at my reflection again, and she'd just say, "There you are," as if she'd been waiting for me to return to myself. And maybe in some way I had been. Still, one thought wouldn't leave me alone. If this was who I was, if this softer, freer version of me was real, what did that mean for the life I'd built until now? Could the two versions coexist, or was one destined to replace the other? I didn't know the answer, but I was starting to understand something important. Maybe this wasn't about choosing one over the other. Maybe it was about finally allowing both to exist in the same space. That realization didn't come with fireworks or clarity. It came quietly, like the sound of rain against glass, constant, patient, impossible to ignore. And as I sat there one night, watching that rain slide down the window, I realized the ultimatum my girlfriend had given me all those weeks ago. Just try it. Just say yes. Had turned into something much deeper. It wasn't about clothes. It wasn't even about transformation. It was about truth, the kind that doesn't demand to be spoken, only lived. And somewhere in that quiet truth, for the first time in my life, I felt whole. Time did what time always does. It softened the edges. Weeks turned into months, and the questions that had once felt like thunder slowly settled into a kind of steady rhythm. The reflection that had startled me that first night no longer looked foreign. It felt familiar, like a part of myself I finally had permission to greet each morning. At first, I expected the feeling to fade. I thought it was just a phase, a fleeting curiosity sparked by one bold request from the person I loved. But it didn't fade. It deepened. It wove itself into my daily life in small, almost invisible ways. The way I carried myself, the colors I reached for, the patience I started showing myself when I looked in the mirror. My girlfriend never rushed me. She never tried to define it for me or label it with words I wasn't ready to use. She simply stayed beside me, like an anchor that kept me from drifting too far into fear. Some nights we'd talk about it until dawn, other nights we wouldn't mention it at all, and both felt right. There were setbacks, too. The first time I caught a coworker staring a second too long when I'd tried a new hairstyle, I felt the old panic rise again, that instinct to shrink, to hide. But then I remembered her words, "You don't have to be afraid of yourself." I repeated them silently until the fear passed. Little by little, life began to feel less like a performance and more like an unfolding. I stopped thinking of it as crossing from one side to another and started thinking of it as connecting two sides that had always been there. One evening, almost a year after that first costume party, we found ourselves looking through old photos on her phone. She paused on one the very first night, the night of the party, and smiled. "Look at you," she said. "You were so nervous." I studied the photo for a long time. I could still see the tension in my posture, the way I'd held my arms, unsure of where to put them. But behind the nervousness there was something else, a spark of recognition, maybe, or the beginning of a question. "I remember thinking it was just a game," I said. "And now?" she asked. Now it feels like that night was the first time I told the truth, even if I didn't have the words yet. She leaned her head against my shoulder. "I think that's what makes it beautiful. You didn't know where it was leading, but you still said yes." That made me laugh softly. "The feminine ultimatum," I said. "You really didn't give me much of a choice." She smiled. "Maybe not. But maybe you were ready to say yes long before I asked." We sat there in silence for a while, scrolling through the past, the glow of the screen flickering across our faces. I realized that every photo since then showed some trace of the change, not just in how I looked but in how I carried myself. There was a softness now, but also a quiet confidence that hadn't existed before. At some point, she looked up at me and said, "Do you ever miss the way things were?" I thought about that for a long moment. I miss how simple it used to seem, I admitted, but not how small it felt. She nodded. That's fair. Later that night, after she'd gone to bed, I stayed up and walked to the mirror again. The same mirror that had witnessed everything from my first awkward hesitation to the calm acceptance that had slowly grown in its place. I didn't change into anything special. I just stood there in my ordinary clothes and looked. For the first time, I didn't try to decide which version of me I was seeing. I didn't analyze or compare. I just looked and felt a quiet kind of peace, the kind that comes when you stop trying to be one thing or another and finally allow yourself to be whole. It struck me then how strange and beautiful the journey had been, how a single request, offered with love and curiosity, had become a turning point in my life. I thought about all the moments I might have missed if I'd said no that night. The laughter, the fear, the slow understanding, the quiet courage it took to see myself clearly. I realized that the ultimatum had never really been about clothes or appearances at all. It had been a gentle dare to face myself, to stop hiding from the parts that didn't fit neatly into the boxes I'd been given. And in doing that, I'd found something I didn't even know I'd lost. Not a new identity, but an honest one. Sometimes I still catch her watching me with that same proud, curious smile she wore the night it all began. When she does, I smile back, grateful that she asked the question, grateful that I didn't run from the answer. If someone had told me then that I would come to feel comfortable this way, I would have laughed. But life has a way of unfolding quietly, like a slow sunrise you don't notice until the light fills the room. And now, when I look in the mirror, I don't see a transformation. I just see myself, whole, real, unafraid. Thanks for watching.